In this video, we look at the Markdown challenge. And the Markdown challenge is interesting. It's different from the ones that we've done in the past because the code for the Markdown challenge already exists. Instead, this is a refactoring exercise. So we get working code, we get working tests, and we have to make it better. Okay. So the instructions are refactor a Markdown parser. It's not going to be a complete full Markdown parser. It's just a subset of what you find in Markdown. But we're going to work through this. And you'll notice that the code is very messy when we get into it. There's some very complex logic that doesn't really need to be there, stuff like that. You'll notice that I did a lot of iterations here. So I treated it like any other refactor that I would have done. I did a small change, tested it, and if it passed, then I committed that. I saved it as an iteration inside of exercism.org. Okay. I'm not going to work in exercism.org because the tests are a little bit slow for me. So having to watch as it runs through the tests, that feels very sluggish to me. So I have moved it over to CodePen, like I always do. Okay. So the code is here. Before we get into that, though, I want to show you how I set up the tests because this is new to me. So the idea of refactoring, at least in my mind, is that every few months, like we're always learning, even every few days, you might learn something new and you'll go back to code and go, wow, that code wasn't great. I can make it better, right? But if you don't have solid tests, you have no way of knowing if you could do that. And I didn't want to run the 17 tests as console logs in here and just have it litter my my console with trues or falses. Okay, so I actually learned something during this where I learned about console.assert. And this isn't something that I've used a lot before, but it's pretty cool. It's not very intuitive, but it works quite well. And the idea here is that within the console.assert, you have a statement that returns either true or false. That's it. It just returns true or false. If it's true, nothing happens. There is no output. And if it's false, then we get a red marker, right? That has some sort of a message. We can pass in some variables. That's also new to me, that we can actually pass in some data into our console strings. And that works for any console, like console log, you can do that. Interesting stuff. So what I've done is I've moved these tests in. They're no longer just tests. Instead, they are just these code blocks so that I can still use constant let. Those are still scoped to the code block, which means this const markdown is not going to interfere with this const markdown. They aren't going to bleed together. And I have these asserts. So if we do this right, we should not see anything. Now, of course, not seeing anything doesn't really help us. So what I've done is I've also added a group and a count iteration. So right now you can see that it says 1 down here. If I hit run again, it will say 2. Now I do have my dev tools, my actual dev tools open here because inside of the CodePen console, we don't get that stuff. Okay. We get the iteration, but it doesn't have the number. It doesn't show the grouping. It doesn't show a failed test. In fact, I can do that really fast just by going here, doing it, hitting run, and there's the assertion failure. So we aren't going to see it over here. This isn't useful to us today. Instead, we're going to see all of it over here. And if we see red, then we know we messed something up. Okay, it's that simple. The nice thing about how I set this up is that you'll see the expected, you'll see the actual. So we will have some useful information. Okay. I'm going to reset this really fast, run it one more time just to make sure that I haven't screwed it up. Excellent. And then I am going to clear this with console count reset, which is going to reset it back to 0 so that we can start at 1. Okay. So the code, we've spent all this time so far in this video, and we haven't even looked at the code yet. So the code is up here. And we have a series of functions that work together to output Markdown. Okay. There's a wrap function. There are some parser functions, functions for header, functions for list item, right? And when I started this, I'm going to try and do this exactly how I did it then. And I'm going to talk through some of my thinking as I did it. Okay. So as I was starting this, I started to notice that it's a little bit hard to read, right? It's not easy to read. And so the first thing that I saw was this. If list, one thing, otherwise another thing. And down here, if list, one thing, another thing. If not list, one thing, well, that's, I mean, maybe these should be in order. So there's our first refactor, right? Just putting them in the right order. We can run that really fast. We should see iteration 1, brilliant, okay? And of course, right at the bottom, if list, all the way down here. Now, these lists kind of clutter, they add noise, okay? And so what I was thinking when I did this was I wanted to reduce the amount of visual code that I was looking at. Not necessarily the amount of code, but the amount of visual code. And so I did that by switching this to a ternary, okay? Right here, the ternary, we have the parse text, move that up, the wrap, copy that in behind the colon, paste it, and now I should be able to comment that out and run it, and everything should just work, okay? So I'm going to do this really fast, clear out some of this. We have, where's that other one? Right here, right? We have another one, so return list, question mark, all of this. It's an array. Be sure that you get it all. And all of this, another array. Copy that, paste it up. Get rid of this. Run it again. And it works, okay? We're going to keep going. So scrolling down, there's another list in here. We can just do the same thing. So list equals inner HTML, copy that, colon, all of this. There's a whole lot of copy and pasting going on here. Bear with me. Delete that, run it again. Always running. This is the nice thing about tests. And I'll say this a few times. If you don't have good tests, how will you know if your stuff is passing? Okay. So you need those really good tests. This is where we put it all on the table. Okay. We make sure that it's where it needs to be. Otherwise, we would have to visually test every single time. Okay. This one kind of becomes a one-liner. So that list, question mark, this bit here, copy it up. It's going to make the line a little bit long, but for what we're trying to do, that is okay. Just like that, run it again. Should get number 5, which we do, okay? And I think there is one more. Yeah, right at the end. So return list question mark, all of this, copy it in. Otherwise, the result, right? And we can just clear that out, run it, and number 6. Excellent. So we've already made it a little bit easier to reason about. We can see that this is really just kind of a one-liner. We have this, it was an if statement, but we also return null, which is really weird, right? So trying to reason about it just a little bit more, okay? If we clean this out, we can start to look at some of these other things. So as an example, down here, my next step as I was going through this, and again, I'm going to be the first to admit that when I did this, it was a couple hours of my life, okay? I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5, 3 hours of my life. Just playing around with this. I would walk away, I would come back, I would take my time to think through it, okay? But my next step was this loop, Okay. This loop doesn't really do anything magical. Instead, it really just looks at the front of the whatever this markdown string is. And if it's a hash, a number sign, then it adds 1 to the count. That's it. That's all it's doing. It's just going through and doing that and checking if those things are number signs. Okay. This is a whole lot of code just to get a count. We can do this a little bit differently. What I decided was I was going to use a regex or a regex, depending on how you pronounce that. So I set up let heading sharps, right? Different word for that number sign, and equal to markdown.match. Okay. This is going to return all of the pieces that match. Now we only want 1. And that 1 is going to be right at the start. It's going to be that number sign, that sharp, and it's going to be as many as we can get. Whoops, just like this. Okay, 1 or more. In fact, we can do that a different way, just like this. So a different way of doing it, but we want to get all those number signs right at the start. If we get those, we are going to get an array of sharps. Okay. Or number signs, whatever you're calling this, octothorps, okay? If we don't, we are going to get null. So there's a little bit of a catch here where if it doesn't find anything, it returns null. That's a bit painful, but we can work around that. So we need to check for that, okay? We can go array.isArray, passing that in, heading sharps. Whoops, where is it? Here it is. Create some space. And if it is an array, then get the length, okay? The length of what? Well, there's only going to be 1. There can only ever be 1 because it's at the start of the line, and it's only 1 line. So it's always going to be an array of 1 thing if it exists. Otherwise, we get 0. And if we've done this, we can comment this out and run it. And we should get number 6, is it? 7, okay? So everything is working great. We've reduced all of this noise. Just gone. Brilliant, okay? From here, we can look at a few other things. As an example, we have this count, right? When I try to simplify things, I try to remove them, right? If we have a line that's only used once, creating a variable for it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So we can run that, do the thing, and it works, okay? From here, I started looking around for other things because that cleans that up pretty nice, okay? I started looking around for other things, and I noticed that isTag isn't used anywhere, right? It's just not. It's dead code. We can actually get rid of that, run it, and it all just works, okay? In fact, we can do that down here as well, right? With this throw error, we never reach this error. It always returns a paragraph, the way that we've set this code up, or the way that the previous dev set this code up. So we can actually safely delete that, run it, and we get no problems, okay? From here, we can do some renaming because we have some really bad names. So up here, as an example, we might change this to wrap in HTML, right? Of course, we have to go and change all that. So let's go down here. Where is it? It is right. Why am I not finding it now? Double check. It is right there. There's one. So we can change that one. And I think there was another one right here. Did I get them all? I think I did. Okay. So wrap in HTML, a little bit more descriptive, right? We want to tell the story of what this code does with the code. Parse underscore, I don't know what that means, but I definitely know what parse strong means. Same with parse M. And those two are used right here. So this is M and this is strong. Brilliant. Okay. If we run this, hopefully I didn't miss anything, and can't find wrap on line 32. See, I did miss one. That's why we have good tests, right? Line 32, wrap, paste it in, run it one more time. Iteration 12 is clean, okay? Now, here's where it gets interesting, because when I was looking at this, I took some time and I realized that I didn't really like how this list was being passed around in every single function, right? We have it here, we have it in parse line, we have it in, well, not the parse, but we're doing all of the work inside of this parse function. So my thinking here is that we should find a way to isolate and reuse that variable, but we don't want it at a global level, because then anyone can mess with it, right? If you reset list to be false when it should be true, now your output is messed up. So we do want to encapsulate that. And the way that I would do that is I would do that with a class. Capital M Markdown parser. Paste everything in here. We are going to bounce up to the top and indent it. And we need a new parser function. So we still need this, but we are going to gut it, okay? So everything inside of here just goes away. We go cons lowercase markdown parser, like this, markdown, if I could type, equals new capital M markdown parser. And just like that. And then of course down here we return lowercase markdown parser dot parse, okay? Because that's going to be a method inside of the class. And we pass in markdown, right? So once we're done cleaning up the class a little bit, this should just work. Right now it's not going to, because these are not methods, right? We can't have this noise. Instead, what we need is to get rid of all of this. So we get rid of all of the leading functions, multiple cursors for the win, just like this, going all the way down. Whoops, too much, like this. This one, where's the next one? Right here, right here. Moving down quickly. I think that's the last one. This still won't work, because once we're in a class, we need to use this keyword, okay? So wrap in HTML is not wrap in HTML, it's this.wrap in HTML. Parser is this.parser, okay? So we go down and we find parser needs to be this dot. I'm going to copy and paste that because we're going to use it a couple times. This dot parse m, this dot parse strong, this dot wrap in HTML. We just keep moving down. Right here, going further, there's one right here. There's one hiding inside. Another one hiding right there. Look at that. See, that one was almost off. I probably would have missed that. But again, that's why we have good tests, okay? Last one, I hope, if we run this. Excellent, okay? So now we have moved everything into a class. At this point, I would probably commit because we're about to do some work. In fact, I would commit after every iteration. That's the beauty of this system, okay? But right here, I'm going to change list into a property on the class. We're going to set it to false at the start. And just for now, just to see if this works, right down here in my parse function, I'm going to change it to this.list. I'm going to get rid of the list inside of here. Now I need to go this.list and this.list, okay? So if this works, I should be able to run this. And I get errors. This is CodePen doing its thing. One more time. There we go, okay? So sometimes CodePen loses communication. That's what those red errors were. But our code still works, which is just awesome. Okay. We have something that we can start building into. The next thing that I want to do is take care of this thing up here. Okay. Because as we start to pass this around, this bit of noise doesn't really work for me. Okay. We're going to do that by switching it to a switch. Switching to a switch. That's, yes, we're going to use switch. Okay. You could use a series of if statements in here, but for my sanity, I went with switch. So I'm going to stay with that. I set it to true. So it runs every single time. And the reason for this is because now I can have individual case statements, right? So individual conditions inside of here. So case 1 is going to be this. We are going to return, okay? Just like this. Case 2 is going to be right here. So we can back it up a little bit. Case 2, tab that in, paste it in. Oh, this should be return. Missing stuff important. And this final one right here is going to be case something, which is this, again, with that return, okay? Now this, again, we always return a paragraph. If we return nothing else, we always return a paragraph. So this case statement right here can actually just be default, right? It's going to fall through to default. If we were doing this as an if else, right? This would be if, else if, else, okay? You could totally do that, but for our system, this is good. This is what we need, okay? Inside of here, we need whatever this test is. Now, the reason that I went to this is because I realized that we have a condition in here, right? It checks, and then it returns null if it fails. And we have a similar condition up in headings right here, right? Where it returns null if it fails. So if we match, then we fall through, okay? And what I wanted to do is take that and move it out. So I moved it right here, and I wanted to use test because test will return a true or a false. In this case, the arguments are out of order. So with test, it actually prefers the regular expression to be out in front. So we can change that to be that number sign, and we want 1, 2, 6. Okay. We only want 6 on this. If there's more, we want it to fall down and become a paragraph. Okay. There should be some sort of a space in there, which is great. And then on the other side, we switch this back to Markdown. So if we get here and this returns true, it's a header, we process it. If it is a list item, we want this. So we want the asterisk. That's going to go right here. And again, I like to add the space. That's a personal preference, but here we are, okay? We can comment this out for a second. We can run it, and hopefully we get more console logs because of CodePen. Try it one more time. There it is, okay? So now everything is working. And the really interesting part about this is that we can actually remove all of those conditionals above. But before I do that, I want to do something else, okay? That something is, again, these arguments, okay? So right here, we have this list. We're passing that in, but do we really need it in here? I don't know, right? I don't think that we do. So what if with this paragraph, we didn't use this, we just used Markdown, okay? And we returned this dot list, okay? So inside of paragraph, we can remove that because we aren't using it anymore. And if we run this, it should just work, which it does. This is brilliant. Now we have a way of getting that information back. It still returns the same thing. So down here, we are still processing the results and updating the the list item, but we can do that with all of these. So right here, we get rid of those. We don't even need to pass in this list item. So right here where it says parse list item, we can just get rid of that. And now we're going to move up and take care of that part, which means that we need to change it to this dot list. And right here, inside of the heading, we get rid of the argument again, this dot list. And if we run that, we get passing tests. This is excellent. This is what we want, right? We want to reduce the amount of noise, and we're slowly making progress on that. Now you'll notice something, especially in this parse header, okay? We didn't actually update this to be this dot list, and it still passed. The reason it still passed is that we can only ever get headings here now, right? We only do this if there's 1 to 6. So way up here, this passed because it can never get here. This is useless code. It's dead code. So we can actually delete that right there. And I think there's another one right here, right? So actually both of these lines, we can just bump them right up, put them back there, get rid of all the code inside of here, and run it. And of course, everything passes, okay? Now, next steps, right? It's a lot, and we've already done a lot to clean this up, but we can keep going. And I did, okay? I noticed that there are a few places where we repeat this tag, okay? This closing UL. So right here underneath parse line item, I'm going to create the close tag, okay? Or close list. You can call it whatever you want, okay? I'm going to set that up. It's going to be what? It's going to be a list. So, sorry, it's going to test for that list, this dot list. And if it is, we want to return an empty string. The reason for it is because we don't want to open a list if we're inside of a list. Admittedly, with real Markdown, we would want that, but for this challenge, they didn't. Okay, their tests don't allow for that. Okay, and then of course in here we return the UL, which means that now we can grab this closed tag, and wherever it's being used, I think there's this is the first one here. So we can just go and clear this out, replace it with this dot close tag. And then down here, here's one. Getting rid of this $, this dot close tag. And of course, way down here, this is just its own thing. So this dot close tag. And we can run that. Ooh, we get some failing assumptions. Interesting. The reason for those failing assumptions is because I got it backwards. So if we scroll right up here, it shouldn't be this dot list. It should actually be not this dot list. So if we clear that out and run it, now everything passes. Okay, we are on track. Now, I do want to add a new one, because if we have a close tag, we may as well have an open tag. Okay, open it up just like this. We are going to switch that. It is going to be the opening tag. And now we can grab this and replace our single opening UL. Okay. So right here, just like this, we paste in this dot open tag. And that should just work. Does it? Of course it does. Okay. So now we have a place where we can maintain these a lot easier. This is looking really sharp. Okay. There's still more that we can do, obviously. Tons more we can do. One thing that we could do here is we could have where we are changing this, this dot list, right? This isn't a great place. Instead, this dot list should really be controlled by these two methods, right? When we open it, we set it to false so that we don't open a new one. And when we close it, we set it to true so that we don't close it. Flip that. This one should be true, and this one should be false. Okay. So we can definitely do that, but we need to change this out a little bit. Okay. So we need to switch to that if this dot list, and we return that empty string. Okay. Otherwise, we return all of this, whereby all of this, I mean just the tag. Doing the same right up here. So if not this dot list, then return the string. Otherwise, return, type it right, return the closing tag. Okay. Inside of the closing tag method, if it is, if we're about to close it, we want to set it to false. So this dot list equals false. Okay. And up here, this dot list equals true. So now we shouldn't need to set this from anywhere else. In fact, if I go and comment this line out and run it, hopefully it just works, and it absolutely does. Okay. So we no longer need to capture this, which means we no longer need new list in here. Okay. Which means that everything that we're returning gets a lot cleaner, right? We go up here inside of this list, there's the final false and the final false here. We move up a little bit. Right here, it's true. We get rid of the true, just like this. And right here, it is false. We get rid of that one too. Run it again just to make sure that we have it right. It did pass, but one more time because CodePen is being funky. Excellent. Okay. In fact, now we have an array with one item. So let's go and fix that really fast. We can scroll right down, empty out the array. Moving up again, we have this array. Whoops. Getting rid of the middle part and this start. Brilliant. Scrolling up, right here. Getting rid of all these arrays. This one. Okay. And so now these methods should really just be returning strings. Hopefully, if I've got this right, we get 27. I'm not sure what CodePen is doing, but we'll just keep going with it. Okay. One more time for good measure, just to make sure I haven't lost my mind. Excellent. Okay. So everything is starting to look sharp, and we have this situation where this closing tag is controlled up here. So if the closing tag is there, right, we test for the list here, and then test for the list here. And we're testing twice. We don't really need to do that. We can just return this part, okay? And what this is going to do is, if I need that closing tag, I'm going to get it, right? Otherwise, I'm going to get an empty string. It's going to be perfect. So just to test, parse paragraph, we get, right? It works. Brilliant. We can move up. We can do that same thing with all of this. So we have the opening tag, and right here we have the closing tag again, simplifying all the way through to make it work. Okay. Okay. So what have we done? We've done just a bunch of stuff, right? We've simplified so much of this. We still need this ternary. Please don't clear that out just yet. Okay. Because that's our final closing tag if we need it. But everywhere else, we've reduced it to almost a single line, right? Almost a single line in here. Single line. Maybe not on this parse text though. So maybe we should take care of that, because we are using that in a few places. As an example right here, we're still passing in that Boolean, okay? So let's make the assumption that parse text no longer needs this, and we're just going to use this dot list. Okay. So this dot list, parse text. Let's go and find that really fast. I believe there are two of them. So there's one right here where we're passing in true, and there is another one down here where we're passing in false. This is going to fail. So if we run this, we are going to get some failing assertions. And the reason that we're getting these failing assertions is because we close the tag too fast. Okay. And what I mean by that is inside of the paragraph or inside of this parse line, okay, we close the tag here and then we get the HTML. But what we really want to do is we want to close the tag above the inner HTML. And then whatever that response is, we use that inside of parse text, and then we join them back up. Okay. So right here, we need to grab this, cut it out, and go const equals, so const output equals this dot open tag. Okay. And we can set that to output. And I think there was another one. Let's test it really fast. We run it. Should still be throwing errors. It is because, which one was it? Was it this one? I forget. 2 seconds. Wait, I'm actually just looking at it wrong. Sorry. Again, CodePen is tricking my eyes. So as far as I can tell, this one, if we clear this out, we run it, everything works. So again, to reiterate, we were closing the tag after we generated this line, okay? And because parse text depends on whatever the current this dot list is, we need to open it, not close it. We need to open it before we do the work. Okay. So we open it, and then parse text knows what to do. Knows what to do. My tongue flipping over in my mouth, and then we put it all back together. Again, running it, it should just work. Okay. So now we are into the cleanup stage. Okay, because we've done just a bunch of work. Right. So some other things that we can do here, we could in fact add a constructor, which I did. So right here, markdown, and moving it over, this dot markdown equals markdown. Okay. And then of course going and using that all the way down in the parser. So this dot markdown, we no longer get markdown here. And in our function that creates all of this this goodness, we move markdown into the constructor. Okay, we can run that. Should just work. It does. Okay, we can also go through and change some things. So maybe inside of these functions, this is just a line. It's not the whole markdown file. So this is a little bit confusing to me. Okay. What I would like to do is I would like to grab that and this one, and going all the way down just like this, change them to line. Okay. And that makes a lot more sense to me because markdown implies the entire file or the entire thing. Okay. And it's not. So we are going to clean this up just a little bit. I think it's just the one there. Yes. One more right here. And of course, parse line, which is where it all starts. Okay. So all of these, change them to line, run it, and it should just work. It does. Okay. Other things we can do, we can change this to, we only ever use the item. We don't use the index for anything other than getting the item, right? So we could change this to line of lines, just like this. which means that we can clean all of that out. Brilliant. In fact, if we wanted to, we can move this right into here to simplify it quite a bit more. I'm not sure that that makes a lot of sense, but we absolutely can keep working through this file and finding new ways to simplify. Okay. At this point, we have it. I only want to do one more thing, and that is with list, because the whole point of using a class was that we could not change list from outside. We wanted to encapsulate it. We wanted to protect it. And right now it is not. So if I go back down to here, I could actually do something like markdown parser dot list equals false and just completely mess up my parser. It would be all kinds of messy, not great. So maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe instead we want to protect this, and we do that with the number sign. Okay. So we set up this, this dot pound list or this dot number sign list so that it's always safe. We can no longer access this from outside of the class instance, which is awesome. We go down, we find places where that exists and change it. Right, where is it? Looking for all of them, trying to remember all the different places that I set them up. Again, we actually reduced it quite a bit, right? We don't have that anymore. And then, of course, right here, make sure I didn't miss any, and I totally did. Where did I miss it? It is right, line of lines. I must have missed one. Right here. So my conditionals are not working. Good. Okay. Just to make sure, I'm going to run it one more time, and we get passing tests. Okay. So bringing it full circle, we clean this out. We completely restructured it in a way that I feel is more maintainable. We can just grab this class. We could have this class in a separate utility file and just use it wherever we need to. That's great. It started out really messy. We had a lot of if statements around the list. So we converted those to ternaries so that we could have an easier time of seeing the forest through the trees. Okay. Sometimes we just move things around so that we can see what's going on. And that's important. You'll also note that even with those ternaries later on, we got rid of them completely. Okay. And sometimes we do that. We move things around so that we can make changes somewhere else so that we can come back and just delete code, which is awesome. Okay. We renamed some functions. Some of these functions didn't have great names on them, so we did that. I mean, parser could probably be a better name, but what do I know? We removed a bunch of different loops, one in the header function. There was a whole bunch of weird logic inside of this parse header. There's this loop down here. Again, we could go and explore that with something like a map. So if you really wanted to, here's one more, right? Here's one more. We have lines.map line, changing it to this dot parse line. In fact, it's just right here. Copy, pasting it in. So that's going to process, and then we're going to join it all up like this on an empty string. And now, just like this, we have reduced it down to basically nothing, which gets us to iteration 40. Okay. So again, we could keep going. Okay. But switching away, we had some redundant code with that throw. If we needed the throw later on, we could bring it back, right? We can delete stuff and bring it back when we need it. Right now we don't. So we just deleted it because saving code, we don't need to. Okay, that's Git's job. Git will save all that stuff for us when we commit. We can just cherry pick it back out or revert if it's really necessary. Okay. We added a few new things to make our controls a little bit easier to manage, right? So now we control the opening and closing list tags a little bit better. Probably could use better names here. Should be open list tag, close list tag, right? Decisions, lots and lots of decisions. And of course, all the way through, right? We reduced it down. You'll remember that even in here, we were returning an array that had either the string or, sorry, not either or, but it returned a string and a Boolean for the list, okay? And we don't need that anymore, right? We cleaned it out quite a bit. Now, this has been 45 minutes, which is probably one of my longer videos, but when I did it, again, it took me probably the better part of 2.5 hours or so, because again, you take your time to think through it. And as you're thinking through it, you will come up with these ideas. And all of this, the important part of all of this is that it would be very, very challenging if we didn't have some sort of tests way down here, right? All these tests to make sure. Again, if it failed, we would be able to see that quite well. So new to me is console.assert. Again, not super intuitive and might not be as flexible as Jest or vtest, but still very cool for smaller projects. Okay. That's it. That's the whole thing. We can back this out, run it one more time, just because I like to see everything passing. Mismatch client ID. I'm pretty sure that's CodePen again. Just one more time, throwing it for me. Something going on here. But the tests are passing. That's the important thing. It was working. This is just CodePen being CodePen, unfortunately. Did you do it a different way? Did you learn something interesting about how I refactor? Would you have refactored a different way? Would you have started somewhere else? Please hit me up in those comments, right? Comments are awesome. Let me know what you would have done differently or what surprised you about this solution. And we'll keep that conversation going. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.